By the time the third resignation landed in my inbox, I already knew something was wrong. I just did not know how ugly it was going to get. My name is Natalie Farrow, and I had spent 6 years building a software consulting firm with my business partner, Mila. 3 of my most experienced employees left within the same 2-week period. Not interns, not junior developers still figuring out whether consulting was for them. These were the people I trusted with difficult clients, rush deadlines, messy legacy systems, and the quiet emergencies that make or break a small software firm. Each one told me a different story. One said she needed a change after a stressful year. One said his mother's health had made him rethink his priorities. One said he wanted to move into a product company instead of client work. On paper, none of it looked suspicious. People leave jobs. Good people leave good jobs. I had owned enough of the business by then to know that no amount of loyalty speeches or company lunches could change the fact that talented employees have their own lives, ambitions, and private reasons. So when the first resignation came in, I was disappointed but gracious. When the second one came in 5 days later, I was worried. When the third one came in the following week, I closed my office door, stared at the screen, and felt my stomach drop in a way I still remember. We started the company in a shared office with 2 folding desks, 1 unreliable printer, and a list of former clients from our old jobs who were willing to take a chance on us. By the time everything fell apart, we had 23 employees, long-term contracts with regional healthcare companies, several logistics clients, and a reputation for delivering complicated custom software without turning every project into a disaster. That reputation was not accidental. I had hired carefully. I had trained people personally. I had built templates, proposal language, project roadmaps, onboarding guides, and delivery systems that helped our team operate like a much larger firm. Mila was brilliant with sales and client relationships. I was stronger on operations, delivery, and team management. For years, that balance worked. Then it stopped working. In the last year of our partnership, Mila and I had begun arguing about the direction of the company. She wanted to shift toward higher-risk startup-style product work. I wanted to stay focused on consulting contracts that paid reliably and kept salaries stable. She thought I was too cautious. I thought she was chasing prestige at the expense of the people whose mortgages depended on us making payroll every 2 weeks. Those disagreements were serious, but they did not feel fatal at first. Business partners argue. We had argued before. I assumed, naively, that if the partnership ever became impossible, we would sit down with lawyers and accountants and negotiate like adults. One of us would buy the other out, or we would divide clients, or we would sell the company and walk away. I did not imagine Mila was already planning to hollow out the business from the inside. The first resignation came from Elena Park, our senior project manager. Elena had been with us for 4 years and knew almost every active client better than anyone except me. She came into my office on a Monday morning holding a printed letter, which was unlike her. Elena did everything digitally. "Natalie, I'm sorry," she said before she even sat down. I looked at the paper and already knew. "You're leaving." She nodded. "I've been offered something that lines up better with where I want to go next." I asked where, and she hesitated just a second too long. "It's a new company," she said. "Small. Still getting organized. I'd rather not say too much until everything is public." That answer annoyed me, but I did not show it. I congratulated her, told her she had been valuable to us, and asked for a transition plan. She was professional, maybe overly professional. She promised documentation. She offered to train whoever took over her accounts. She looked guilty, but people often look guilty when resigning from a place where they were treated well. 5 days later, Marcus Bell resigned. Marcus was one of our best senior developers, the kind of person clients requested by name once they had worked with him. He said he needed to step back from consulting because his mother had been having medical issues, and he wanted a job with fewer client emergencies. "Is this about workload?" I asked him. "No," he said quickly. "You've been fair, it's just personal timing." I asked where he was going, and he gave me almost the same answer Elena had given. A new company, still quiet, nothing fully public yet. That was when the first small alarm bells started ringing in my head. The third resignation came from Priya Desai, our lead solutions architect. Priya had helped me build half of our internal project templates. She understood our discovery process, our estimation model, our standard implementation plans, and the way we priced complicated work without getting trapped by vague client requirements. Losing her hurt in a different way because she did not just do good work. She knew how our work was structured. Priya sent her resignation by email on a Thursday afternoon, then came to my office looking pale. "I know the timing is bad," she said. I almost laughed because the timing was more than bad. It was brutal. "Where are you going?" I asked. She folded her hands in her lap. A product-focused startup. What is it called? She looked down. Lumen Harbor Systems. I wrote the name on a sticky note after she left, then sat there staring at it. Lumen Harbor Systems. I typed it into a search engine. There was almost nothing. A bare-bones website with a logo, a vague line about workflow automation, and no team page. No press release, no funding announcement, no office address beyond a mailbox service. That by itself was not strange. Startups often looked half imaginary in their earliest months. Then I searched state business records. The listed owner was a man named Rafael Serrano, Mila's brother. I remember the exact physical sensation of seeing that name. My skin went cold first, then hot. I leaned back from my desk like the screen had moved toward me. Rafael was not a software founder, he owned part of a small events company 2 counties over. I had met him twice at Mila's family gatherings, and both times he had asked me basic questions about what our firm did. Not strategic questions. Not technical questions. Basic ones. For several minutes, I did nothing except sit very still. It would have been easy to storm into Mila's office right then. She was down the hall, probably on a client call, probably smiling in that calm, polished way that made people trust her. I could have printed the public record, slapped it on her desk, and demanded an explanation. But I knew better. 3 employees joining the same new company founded under her brother's name looked terrible, but it was not proof. Maybe Rafael had really started something and asked Mila for informal advice. Maybe Elena, Marcus, and Priya had found the opportunity through industry contacts. Maybe Mila knew and had failed to disclose it, which would still be serious, but not necessarily the same as secretly recruiting my team behind my back. I needed evidence before I accused my own business partner of betrayal. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying conversations from the previous months. Mila asking oddly specific questions about which employees were most frustrated. Mila pushing for access to certain proposal documents, even when she was not involved in delivery. Mila making casual comments about whether some of our senior people were still aligned with the future of the firm. At the time, those comments had sounded like ordinary partnership tension. In hindsight, they sounded like scouting. The next morning, I called an attorney named Priscilla Nakamura. Priscilla had handled contract work for us twice, but I had never used her for anything like this. I asked if she could meet privately. She heard something in my voice and made room for me at the end of the day. Her office was quiet, tidy, and almost painfully calm. I brought a folder with resignation letters, screenshots of the Lumen Harbor website, and the state filing showing Rafael Serrano as owner. Priscilla read everything without interrupting me. When she finished, she tapped one finger against the public record. "This does not prove Mila owns or controls the company," she said. "But it gives you enough reason to investigate carefully." "What can I legally do?" I asked. "I don't want to make this worse by acting out of anger." "That is the correct instinct," she said. "Do not confront her yet. Do not access private accounts. Do not try to trick employees into making statements. We need to establish whether Mila has a direct financial connection, whether she recruited them, and whether any confidential materials were moved." She recommended a private investigator named Marisol Vance, someone she had worked with on business disputes before. Priscilla was very clear that Marisol's job would not be to play spy games. She would use lawful records, interviews with willing sources, and business intelligence methods that would hold up if the matter turned legal. I left that meeting with a strange mix of dread and relief. Dread because the situation might be exactly what I feared. Relief because I no longer had to pretend it was just an unfortunate coincidence. For the next several weeks, I lived 2 lives. In one life, I was still running the company. I met with clients. I reassigned work. I comforted managers who were panicking about deadlines. I told the remaining staff that we were adjusting after unexpected departures and that I appreciated their patience. I stayed late to review timelines. I joined technical calls I had not expected to be on. I kept the business moving because people were still depending on me. In the other life, I was quietly helping Priscilla and Marisol document whether my business partner had betrayed the company we built together. Mila acted almost normal during that period. That was the part that unsettled me most. She expressed concern about the staffing shortage. She asked whether Elena had completed all her handoff notes. She suggested we might need to delay one client's rollout because Marcus was no longer available. She even made a comment in a leadership meeting that made my hands curl under the conference table. "We need to understand why senior people are leaving," Mila said, looking around at the group. "Retention has to be a priority." I looked at her across the table and wondered how long she had practiced sounding sincere. A week later, we had a client meeting with a healthcare network that was considering a major workflow modernization project. Mila led the relationship side, as usual, and I handled delivery questions. The client asked whether our recent staffing changes would affect capacity. Mila sighed in a way that sounded regretful and responsible. "We've had a few unexpected departures," she said, "but Natalie is already stabilizing the delivery plan." She turned toward me with a small, sympathetic smile. To anyone else, it probably looked like partnership. To me, it felt like theater. I answered calmly. I explained our revised staffing model, named the people taking over, and reassured the client with specifics. Inside, I was furious. Not loud furious, cold furious. The kind where you become very precise because if you let one crack show, everything underneath might pour out. Marisol's first update came 10 days after I hired her. She called me from what sounded like her car. "I've confirmed Rafael Serrano does not appear to have the independent capital to launch this company at the level it is operating," she said. "That does not prove Mila funded it, but it makes the filing structure look more like a front." "What level is it operating at?" I asked. "Enough to offer signing bonuses." I closed my eyes. Marisol continued. "I have also identified a former administrative contractor at Lumen Harbor who is willing to speak. She left after a payment dispute. I am not promising anything yet, but she may have seen communications involving Mila." That was the first time the word payments entered the picture in a concrete way. A few days later, Marisol and Priscilla arranged a call with the former contractor, a woman named Tessa. Tessa had done early operations work for Lumen Harbor, setting up vendor accounts, scheduling interviews, and helping organize onboarding files. She was careful, nervous, and very clear that she would only share what she personally saw. "I thought Mila was the founder," Tessa said on the call. My mouth went dry. Priscilla kept her voice even. "Why did you think that?" "Because Rafael was barely involved. He signed documents, but Mila made decisions. She approved offers. She told me which candidates were priority hires. She said the company needed people who already understood client delivery at a high level." "Did she mention Natalie's company?" Priscilla asked. There was a pause. "She said she knew where the strongest people were," Tessa replied. Tessa had screenshots of messages because she had been trying to prove she was owed money. She had not taken them for my benefit. She had taken them because Lumen Harbor failed to pay her final invoice on time, and she wanted evidence of work performed. In those screenshots, Mila's name appeared again and again. One message referred to Elena as the cleanest first move because she could bring structure fast. Another said Marcus would need a bonus large enough to overcome guilt. A third message about Priya made me feel physically sick. Priya knows the delivery architecture. If we get her, Natalie loses the operating brain. I had to mute myself on the call. There is a particular pain in reading someone describe your people like pieces on a board. It was not just that Mila had targeted employees. It was that she had understood exactly what their loss would do to me and to the company, then planned around that damage. Marisol's research then traced the funding. Through public records, loan documents Tessa had handled, and business filings connected to early vendor payments, she found that Mila had made a substantial personal loan to Rafael shortly before Lumen Harbor was registered. The loan agreement described the money as family support for a business venture, but messages showed the money was being used to fund startup expenses, including signing bonuses for my employees. The amounts were not enormous by venture capital standards, but for individuals they were meaningful. Elena had received $20,000. Marcus had received $25,000. Priya had received $30,000. All three had been offered compensation packages slightly above what we paid, with the bonuses structured to make an immediate jump attractive. I understood why they left. That was another complicated pain. I was angry at them, especially once I learned they had accepted offers from a company tied to Mila's family. But employees are not partners. They did not owe me the same fiduciary duties Mila owed me. They had careers, families, and financial pressures I could not fully know. What Mila did was different. She had sat beside me as an owner while secretly paying to remove the people most essential to the company's stability. Priscilla told me not to contact Elena, Marcus, or Priya yet. "We need to know whether this is limited to recruitment," she said, "or whether resources also moved." That was when she recommended a forensic accountant named Cornelius Akabe. Cornelius was not what I expected. I had pictured someone severe and dry, maybe because the words forensic accountant sound like a locked filing cabinet. Instead, he was warm, direct, and deeply methodical. He asked for access to company financial records, shared drives, vendor invoices, software subscriptions, internal document logs, and administrative permissions. Because Mila and I were equal partners, Priscilla helped structure the review carefully so it stayed within company-owned systems and legitimate business oversight. Cornelius began with money. He looked for unusual reimbursements, unexplained vendor payments, strange software purchases, and any sign that company funds had gone directly into Lumen Harbor. At first, he did not find a simple smoking gun. Mila had not written checks from our company account to her brother's startup. She had not billed us for Lumen Harbor expenses in an obvious way. Then he started looking at access patterns. Our firm kept proprietary client project templates in a controlled shared workspace. They were not magic, but they were valuable. Over 6 years, I had refined discovery questionnaires, risk scoring sheets, implementation timelines, data migration checklists, compliance review prompts, proposal structures, and post-launch support plans. Those documents allowed us to walk into a client pitch with a level of organization that usually took firms years to develop. Cornelius found that Mila had downloaded large batches of those templates late at night over several weekends. Technically, as a partner, she had access. But the timing was strange, and the files she downloaded were not tied to her active client work. Even worse, some of the downloaded files matched language appearing on Lumen Harbor's early proposal materials. Tessa had provided one sample proposal she helped format before leaving. Cornelius compared it to our templates and found whole sections that were not merely similar. They followed our structure, used our internal phrasing, and preserved several formatting quirks from documents I had personally created. One phrase in particular hit me hard. Years earlier, after a disastrous client discovery process, I had written a line into our internal template. A requirement not owned by a decision maker is a future dispute waiting for a calendar date. It was not elegant, but it was mine. It appeared almost exactly in Lumen Harbor's proposal. Cornelius showed me the comparison in his office. Side-by-side documents, highlighted sections, metadata. Access logs. This is not accidental overlap, he said. I stared at the screen. She took the operating system of the company, he nodded. That is a fair business description. Legally, Priscilla will choose the language, but from an accounting and records perspective, these materials were copied and used to benefit another entity. By then, Priscilla had enough to prepare a formal confrontation. She warned me that Mila would likely deny everything at first. She also warned me not to let the conversation become emotional theater. You are not trying to win an argument in the room, Priscilla said. You are creating a record and giving her an opportunity to respond. We scheduled the meeting for a Tuesday morning in our conference room. Priscilla attended with me. Mila arrived carrying a coffee and her laptop, expecting, or pretending to expect, a routine partnership discussion. She smiled at Priscilla. I didn't realize this was a legal meeting. Priscilla replied, it is a business matter with legal implications. Mila's expression changed only slightly, but I knew her well enough to see it. Her eyes sharpened. I began because I needed to. Mila, we know about Lumen Harbor systems. She looked at me for one beat too long. What about it? We know Raphael is listed as owner. We know you funded the startup through a personal loan. We know you personally contacted Elena, Marcus, and Priya. We know signing bonuses were offered using that funding. We also know our internal project templates were downloaded and used in Lumen Harbor proposals. Mila set her coffee down very carefully. That is a lot of accusation, she said. It is evidence, Priscilla said, sliding a folder across the table. Mila did not open it immediately. She looked at me instead. Natalie, our partnership has been broken for a long time. That does not answer any of this. You refused to see where the market was going, she said. You wanted to keep us small and safe forever. I wanted to keep us solvent. You wanted control. I almost responded to that, but Priscilla gave me a quick glance, and I stopped. Mila opened the folder. She skimmed the first page with a dismissive expression that faded as she turned to the screenshots. Her jaw tightened. She flipped to the access log, then the proposal comparison. For the first time in weeks, she looked less composed. Some of those materials were materials I helped develop, she said. Some, I replied. Not all, and none of them belonged to Lumen Harbor. I had every right to prepare for what came next. You had the right to negotiate a separation, I said. You had the right to make an offer for my share or ask me to buy yours. You had the right to leave. You did not have the right to secretly build a competing company through your brother while paying our employees to leave and using our confidential materials to pitch clients. There it was. The whole thing said out loud. Mila leaned back. For a moment, she looked tired. Not remorseful exactly. Tired, cornered, maybe angry that her plan had been interrupted before she could present it as inevitable. You would have dragged it out for a year, she said quietly. Any formal split. Any buyout. You would have buried us in process. You never asked for one. I knew how you would react. No, I said. You knew what you wanted to do, and you wanted a head start. Priscilla took over from there. She outlined the claims we were prepared to pursue: breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of confidential business materials, interference with business relationships, and damages caused by the targeted recruitment of key employees before any formal dissolution of the partnership. She did not dramatize it. She did not threaten more than she could support. She simply laid it out, document by document. Mila denied parts of it. She insisted Raphael had real involvement. She claimed the employees were unhappy already. She argued the templates represented general knowledge, not confidential materials. But she also admitted enough. She admitted she had grown convinced our partnership was unsalvageable. She admitted she had helped Raphael launch Lumen Harbor. She admitted she had spoken directly with Elena, Marcus, and Priya before they resigned. She admitted she had not disclosed any of it to me because, in her words, that would have defeated the purpose. That sentence became important later. The legal process that followed was not quick, but it was faster than I feared because the evidence was strong. Priscilla filed claims and requested immediate protections around our confidential materials. Mila's attorney tried to frame the dispute as a messy breakup between business partners with overlapping industry contacts. But Marisol's recruitment evidence and Cornelius's template analysis made it difficult to pretend this was ordinary competition. The messages were especially damaging. It is one thing to say employees chose to leave. It is another to have written proof that Mila described each person in terms of how their departure would weaken our company. The phrase about Priya being Natalie's operating brain came up repeatedly. So did the message about Marcus needing a bonus large enough to overcome guilt. At one point during mediation, Mila's attorney suggested the employees had already been dissatisfied and would have left anyway. Priscilla responded, "Then your client would not have needed to secretly fund bonuses through her brother's company while concealing her involvement from her equal partner." I did not smile, but I wanted to. The settlement dissolved the partnership on terms significantly favoring me. I retained the original company name, client contracts, internal systems, and the right to continue operations without Mila. Mila surrendered her ownership interest at a reduced valuation that accounted for the harm caused by her conduct. Lumen Harbor was prohibited from using our proprietary templates and required to certify deletion of copied materials. There were financial terms I cannot discuss in exact numbers, but I can say they mattered. Not because they erased the damage, but because they acknowledged it. Elena, Marcus, and Priya did not return. I did not ask them to. By then, too much trust had been broken, and I needed to rebuild with people who were fully committed to the company's next chapter. I heard later that Lumen Harbor struggled after the settlement because losing access to our materials and losing Mila's behind-the-scenes support made the business far less impressive than it had looked in early pitches. I wish I could say I felt triumphant when the settlement was signed. Mostly, I felt exhausted. For 6 years, Mila had been the person I called when a client threatened to cancel, when payroll projections looked tight, when a proposal needed one more push, when we landed a contract big enough to make us believe we had been right to start the company. We had celebrated together, we had fought together, we had taken risks together. That history did not vanish just because she betrayed me. It made the betrayal heavier. There were practical consequences too. Losing 3 senior employees at once created real damage. Projects slowed, a few clients got nervous, one postponed a contract expansion until we could prove stability. My remaining employees were shaken, not just because people had left, but because the reason became known in careful, limited terms after the settlement. I did not share every ugly detail, but I told the leadership team enough to restore confidence. I won't pretend this was just normal turnover. I told them in a meeting after the legal restrictions allowed me to speak more openly. There was conduct by a former partner that harmed the company. We addressed it legally. We are still here, and we are going to rebuild in a way that protects the people who stayed. One of my managers, Denise, asked the question everyone was probably thinking. How do we know something like this won't happen again? I answered honestly. I can't promise no one will ever disappoint us again. But I can promise we are changing the agreements, access controls, and oversight that made it too easy. That became the work of the next year. With Priscilla's help, I implemented clearer confidentiality agreements and reasonable non-solicitation provisions. I did not want documents that treated employees like property, because they are not. People have the right to leave. They have the right to pursue better opportunities. But partners, executives, and senior employees with access to sensitive materials needed clearer obligations about not using confidential information to damage the company from inside. Cornelius helped us redesign financial oversight and access logging. Sensitive templates were moved into better controlled systems. Large downloads triggered review. Partner-level access was no longer treated as a blank check without accountability. We created a formal process for documenting who accessed strategic materials and why. It felt awkward at first because small companies often run on trust, but I had learned that trust without verification can become an invitation to quiet harm. I also changed how I managed retention. Before all of this, I thought being fair, paying as well as we could, and maintaining a decent culture were enough. They are important, but they are not enough. I started having more direct conversations with senior staff about career paths, compensation expectations, frustrations, and outside opportunities. Not in a paranoid way, in a practical way. If someone was unhappy, I wanted to know before a competitor used that silence against us. The hardest part was rebuilding my own judgment. For months after the settlement, I questioned every past conversation with Mila. Had I missed obvious signs? Was I too trusting, too focused on delivery, too reluctant to admit the partnership had become dangerous? The answer, I eventually accepted, was complicated. Yes, I missed signs. But I missed them because I assumed conflict still had boundaries. I assumed a business partner who disagreed with me would still honor the basic duties of being a partner until we formally separated. That assumption was not foolish. It was the foundation of doing business with another person. Mila was the one who violated it. Cornelius said something near the end of his review that stayed with me. Partners planning to leave sometimes convince themselves they are already morally separate, he told me. But the law usually does not work that way. Until the partnership is formally dissolved, the duties remain. You do not get to secretly compete, recruit, and divert resources just because you feel done in your own mind. That sentence gave language to what had bothered me most. Mila had decided privately that the partnership was over, then acted as if that private decision released her from every obligation she still legally and ethically owed. She wanted the benefits of leaving before she accepted the responsibilities of leaving. A year after the resignations, the company looked different but healthier. We hired a new senior project manager named Aisha, who brought a level of calm I badly needed. We promoted a developer named Owen into a technical lead role, and he grew into it faster than I expected. Denise took over more operational planning. I stopped trying to replace Priya with one person and instead distributed her old responsibilities across a stronger system. That turned out to be better anyway. No company should depend so heavily on one person that losing them feels like losing its brain. Some clients stayed because they trusted me. Some stayed because the work was too integrated to move easily. A few stayed because, after hearing a careful version of what happened, they respected that we dealt with it directly. We did lose business, but not enough to sink us. By the end of the year, revenue had stabilized, morale had improved, and the company felt less like something I was trying to rescue, and more like something I was choosing to build again. I ran into Mila once after everything was over. It was in the lobby of a downtown office building before a regional technology breakfast. She saw me first. For a second, I thought she might turn away, but she walked over. "Natalie," she said. "Mila." She looked polished, as always, but older somehow. Maybe I did too. "I heard you kept the healthcare network account," she said. "We did. That was always your strength." I did not know whether she meant it as a compliment or a peace offering. I did not accept it as either. "We had a strong team," I said. "You knew that." Her expression tightened. "I made mistakes. You made choices." She looked away then, and the conversation ended shortly after. There was no dramatic apology, no healing moment. Real life does not always hand you those. Sometimes accountability is a signed settlement, a changed access policy, and the ability to walk past someone who hurt you without needing anything from them anymore. When I think back to the beginning, what still amazes me is how ordinary the first signs looked. A resignation letter, a vague new company, a public record with a familiar last name. None of those things screamed betrayal on their own. Together, they formed a pattern. And paying attention to that pattern saved my company. I also think about Elena, Marcus, and Priya. For a long time, I was angry enough that I could barely say their names. Now I see it with more distance. They made choices that hurt us, and I would not hire them again. But Mila held the power in that situation. She had inside knowledge. She had ownership duties. She knew exactly which people to target, and exactly what damage their departure would cause. That is why accountability had to focus on her. If there is one lesson I would pass on to any woman building a business with someone else, it is this. Partnership tension is not just an emotional problem. It is a governance problem. When the relationship starts to strain, document more, clarify more, and protect the business before resentment turns into secret action. You can hope for honesty, but you should still have systems strong enough to survive dishonesty. I am proud that I did not explode when I found Raphael's name on that filing. I wanted to. I wanted to march down the hall and demand the truth from Mila while my hands were still shaking. But waiting, calling Priscilla, hiring Marisol, bringing in Cornelius, and building a record changed everything. Anger told me something was wrong. Evidence gave me the power to do something about it. So that is my story. My business partner secretly funded a competing company under her brother's name, paid my best employees signing bonuses to leave, copied our project templates, and then sat beside me in client meetings, pretending to worry about the staffing shortage she had created. In the end, the truth came out, the partnership was dissolved, and I kept the company I had worked so hard to build. What would you have done if you noticed three trusted employees leaving for the same mysterious startup connected to your own business partner's family? Would you have confronted her immediately, or would you have waited and gathered proof? Share your thoughts, because situations like this are exactly where instinct and patience collide. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want more real-world stories about betrayal, accountability, and rebuilding after someone close crosses the line, subscribe for more. Take care, and I hope you never ignore the small pattern that tells you something bigger is going on.